Evening, everyone. This is OSDIA Facebook Live interview, and I am Mark DeNunzio calling in from Pensacola Beach, Florida. I'm joined by my co-host, Mary from Ohio, who's a member, and Justin in our national office is the managing director, and he will be the moderator. So if you have any questions, please type them into the comment section, and Justin will get them out, and we'll ask our special guest, and we have a special guest tonight, noted award-winning author, Andrew Cotto, if you're from Italy, or Andrew Cotto, if it's from Brooklyn. Whatever you want. We discussed it before in the interview, and he said either or. So Andrew, welcome. Thank you for coming on tonight, and we appreciate you being with us.
Thank you, Mark, for having me, and Mary and Justin. It's really an honor.
Why don't you, you have a book coming out. Why don't you, let's first talk about the book that you have coming out, and then we'll delve into other matters. But sure. Tell us about your newest book. It's not out yet, but it's on the horizon. So go ahead.
Yes, so I have a book coming out on March 25th. It's called Cucina Romana, Another Italian Adventure. I don't even have a copy with me. I think Mary has a copy though.
It is right there.
Oh, there it is. I can't just, yes, there it is. And it is a sequel to a novel called Cucina Tipica, an Italian adventure. So I have officially now an Italian adventure series, which I'm really proud of. And the book follows the path of our protagonist, who in the previous book, Cucina Tipica, arrived in Italy on holiday and decided that he never wanted to leave. And what followed was his attempts to remain in Italy forever. And it's called a food-filled, wine-soaked adventure. Though I always have to make a little note about that adventure part. It's not like the Da Vinci Code adventure. They're not chasing scrolls or down alleys. They're like chasing meals, really good meals. And also some ancestry. The meals take the preference for sure. It's a spoiler alert because he obviously gets to stay there because there's a sequel. In Cucina Romana, the character ends up in Rome on some business affairs, trying to get through the Italian bureaucracy. And another adventure involving ancestry just evolves. So that one, takes place in Rome, split evenly, I guess, between Tuscany and Rome. And it's really just as good as it.
Now, tell me a little bit about the writing process for you, because I've often wondered. Now, do you get an idea? Do you get the whole story in your head and then put it down, or do you just start off and let the story evolve as you go through? Tell me about it.
It's a little bit of both, but probably more the former in that, I need to have some direction before I get going. Getting your butt into a chair every day, without direction is really hard to do. It's probably the thing that stops most writers in their tracks, is that they think they can just sort of sit down and let the magic happen. Right? And I don't think it works that way for most of us mortals. I think if you're going to invest in the type of effort and imagination and planning it takes to complete a novel, you need to really have an idea of what you're going to do first. And for me, it always starts with setting. Even before I have characters, I have a place. I think setting is the most important character, right? Because the where and when the story takes place obviously has an impact on what happens within that place. It's got to be somewhere. Right. So I start with the place where I want to set a story. It's typically been New York City or the areas around New York, and then Italy for these two Italian books. And then I put characters in place, and I know where they're going. I allow some creative freedom to weave its way into the process, but I have a pretty good idea where I'm going before I invest all that time.
Understand. Okay, so there's a plan at the outset, so that's a good idea.
I'm not smart enough not to have a plan. So I got to know where I'm going. Right? I can't wing it.
Okay, Mary, do you have any questions for Andrew?
I do. So first, thank you for joining us tonight. I have a couple of related questions for you. So last year you appeared as a guest on Cara DeFalco's Cara's Cucina, who was actually a guest on OSDIA Interviews Live, and scene from your Cucina Tipica, which inspired one of her recipes. So what was the feeling like not only to write and publish a novel, but to inspire an Italian-American cook to create a new recipe?
That was, there's highlights and there's highlights. This was a highlight, right? When I saw this post from Cara, who I knew of, and that she would read the book. I mean, anytime you get feedback from someone, it just feels so good, right? It's validating. I mean, I look like I'm a well-adjusted person, but writing takes a lot out of you. Right? There's a lot of insecurity, there's a lot of risk to it, and anytime you get a review, a good review, it just makes it feel so good to have someone, say an accomplished cook and a public figure say that they were inspired by your book to make a recipe. It was just, it made my year. All right, I'll say half a year. Made my quarter. How's that? Then we made it together. Did you see that?
I did. I saw that.
That was really fun. And the cool thing about it wasn't like the beefsteak of Fiorentina or like sort of the really well-known Italian dishes that so inspired her. It was a chickpea dish, a cecchi dish, that the character encounters in the story that she made. So it was really fun to have it not be one of the like more obvious choices to make.
So you inadvertently coupled two passions, writing and Italian food. How did you incorporate food into your novels? And then do you have a favorite Italian dish that you like to make?
I think that I've become what I describe as like a food fiction writer. I didn't set out to write about food in my books. I just like feeding people. So I started feeding my characters, right? Even in my earliest books, my first book, The Domino Effect, the character is an Italian-American kid from Queens. And food's not as present in that book as some of the latter ones, but food's a big part of the book. I mean, it is how the kid and his estranged father reconcile. Right? They remember. They go shopping for 7 fish for Christmas Eve together, as like they used to do when he was a little boy, right? And then they get sandwiches from the latteria, and latticini, excuse me. All right, and they eat these roast pork sandwiches with fresh mozzarella, and they're like, oh yeah, I remember we used to do this together all the time, right? And it conjured this memory that touched his heart, right? And it changed his thinking about things. So I'm always finding ways to put food into my books. Like my noir series, Attleboro Blues and Black Irish Blues, the protagonist is not a detective, he's a chef. Okay? And he's a pretty reticent soul, so he communicates, I use this cooking to develop his character. Right? It just went from there. And of course, if you're in Italy, if someone ever wrote a book about Italy and there was the food in it, I would never speak to that. Right? Food's a driving part of that country's culture, and it's a huge part of the character because he has a really great palate. And food provides him nourishment and comfort. Right? It provides him with well-being that he so needs, which is why he really doesn't want to leave. Yes, he enjoys the food very, very much. Right? But it's that sense of reprieve he gets and belonging he gets when eating Italy that means so much to him. I wrote an article for La Cucina Italiana magazine saying that Italian food was my muse. I explained how I don't know any other writer who's so food driven.
So tell us the impact of your Italian heritage on your writing, on your career, and
all of my characters, all my protagonists, I should say, my main characters are Italian American. There's a couple who have Irish in their family too. We don't mention that part of it. The Italian American part is part of who they are, and that inspires much of the novel's actions because a lot of these stories are about identity. It's always, obviously I'm Italian American. It was a big part of my life growing up, right? The part of my life, from a culture standpoint, my favorite sweat hog was Vinnie Barbarino, right? My favorite guy on Happy Days was the Fonz, right? We knew that Sinatra was a god and that Pacino was the best actor, maybe De Niro. This is like, was part of who we were, right? But going back to food, keep going back to food. Like, my favorite part about my Italian American heritage was being with my family every Sunday for all day lunch at my grandmother's house, right? And it was every single Sunday, and it was not an option, right? There's no like soccer game or birthday party or illness of anything short of hospitalization, right? That would keep you from our grandfather's house on Sunday, and you got there at 11. If you didn't go to church, if you went to church, you can get there at noon, but you were there until dark, right? And I remember those days so vividly because they were so distinct, for most people's lives that I knew, and so memorable in that we were all together as a family, and nothing else mattered, right? The TV didn't go on, right? It was just talking, dancing, music in the background, kids running around, and of course eating, right? And the image of my grandfather at his long table in his little house in Palisades Park, New Jersey, at the end of the table, who spoke no English, just waiting for his food to come. He had his napkin stuck in his dress shirt, right? And he was feeding his family, his 3 daughters, their husbands, all his grandkids, right? With the work he did as a mason, a brick mason during the week, right? And the pride that came out of him, right? And the sense of having us all around was just so memorable to me. And I think there was something distinctly Italian to that.
So more about your ancestors. Where are they from in Italy? And did you ever get back to the hometowns in
I
Italy?
lived in Messina in Sicily, where my grandfather came from. My mother and her sisters went on one of those ancestry trips, 25 years ago, trying to find their family, and they didn't. They're probably just because they were just probably drinking wine so much and they couldn't bother to actually dig in and find them. But I was under the impression that they were not from there, and he was from a little town outside of Messina, so I didn't get to do that. And I'm not sure where they are, if they're still around. I mean, I'm not sure I could handle it. I think it'd be so powerful, to meet them and have them, say, oh, this was Carmelo's, grandson. It would. I know people do this and do it with great interest. I'm a little leery. I feel connected enough to Italy as a country, as my home, where my heritage derives from. This funny thing happened though, that my father's family is from Piemonte. And I was contacted a few months ago by someone through Facebook saying that their last name is Cotto, right? And they're from Piemonte, and that we must be family. And they just happen to be wine producers. They make Barbaresco up in the hills outside of Alba, I think. So I'll be finding them.
Great. I think that Justin has a question. Go ahead, Justin, from the audience.
Well, before I get to, we've had multiple people write in, they must be familiar with you and your writing and saying hello from New York and especially in Brooklyn and then New Jersey and California. But I wanted to ask you a question. On the pre-show, we were talking about your time in Italy and how your novels are not necessarily biographical or autobiographical, but there is some truth in your life tied into the book. And I found that really interesting. Can you elaborate on how you maybe made sure you made it back to Italy after just a few hours being on ground there?
Sure. I'd never gone to Italy my whole life until I was in my late 20s, and I was there. I did the traditional, first visit thing where you go to Venice, Florence, and Rome. Right? After a day, it was like 2 days in Venice, I guess, and went down to Florence. Right, and I literally in Florence for half a day, maybe I don't know, very short period of time. Right? I'm not keeping track of how long I was there, but it was just like the first day or so. And I was like, I have to live here. I was just overwhelmed with the beauty, right? With the feeling I had when I was there. When I'm in Italy, I'm so happy. I'm miserable. You can't tell, but I'm happy here in America too. I'm a happy person. But when I was in Italy, there's a sense of serenity that just surrounded me that I just knew I had to experience for a long period. It was so profound. The experience that had changed my life in that I came back to New York. I started making plans to quit my job. I started making plans to pursue my dream of being a writer and a teacher. If I hadn't made that trip to Italy, I don't think I would have been so inspired, because I wanted to also have the ability, in that career transition to go live there, right? So it made sense for me, strategically, right? I didn't need to be in New York anymore if I was quitting my job, right? So, I went into the hills south of Florence, lived in a barn, wrote my first novel, The Domino Effect, right? And came back to New York and got my master's degree in creative writing and launched my new career. And it was really inspired, almost entirely by the feeling I had the first time I was really immersed in Italy, the country. A few years later, I went back and taught at John Cabot University in Rome for a summer. It was that summer there in 2014 where I felt like I had enough command of Italy as a country to write books that were set there. Right? All the other things I wrote, I might have wrote a book when I was in Italy, but it wasn't set there. And people often say to me, or during that period before I started writing novels in Italy, like, when are you going to write your Italian book? When are you going to write your memoir, your Eat, Pray, Love book, right? And my response was like, my book would be like Eat, Drink, Repeat. I don't think anybody wants to see that. It wasn't pretty, right? It wasn't like I was falling in love and running around. It was like, drinking wine and eating, and like, there was nothing something really romantic about my experience. Only to me. I mean, I found it very romantic, but that was, I don't think anyone would have interest in my particular experiences, but I thought they could benefit from the places that I was immersed.
Yeah. Well, and you mentioned you speak so highly and so fondly of Florence, and you seem to have a special connection. What is it about Florence that draws you in, that makes you so connected to it?
I mean, there's a scene in the book where the character is explaining what it feels like the first time you saw Florence from Piazza Michelangelo. There's a piazza above the city of Florence, right? Where people who are in the know park, because you can park up there and walk down to the city, not have to worry about driving around all that craziness trying to find a parking spot. And the not only is it a convenient place to leave your vehicle for the day for free, but the view is just so mesmerizing. You're looking at a place that seems surreal, right? You can't believe that people made it. Right? It looks like a little tiny model that that someone with a great imagination and motor functioning skills could build a little tiny replica thing, but it's real, right? It's towers and churches and with these incredible domes, right? And I find that Florence just feels itself like a museum, like this living validation of what human beings are capable of, right? To see that they built that city so long ago, and it still stands, and it's still, the beauty of it, is eternal. And I just find it, so satisfying. I feel like, wow, this is old, right? Like, I'm walking around Lower Manhattan, like, this building was built in, 1670. I'm like, that's pretty old. I'm like, look at a load of these places in Italy, right? That's old, right? And I find it, very life affirming, to be there, and the food.
And the food doesn't suck, right?
And the food is right.
What's your favorite, Tuscan or Florentine dish?
No, I mean, how much time do we have?
We got plenty of time. Go for it.
Okay. I mean, I like the staples. I mean, I'm a beef steak and Fiorentina guy. That giant steak they make. I love some of the lesser known dishes. In Cucina Tipica, if you notice, there's a wild boar on the cover of this book, right? That's what they call a cingale in Italy. Cingale's spectacular, right? These boars run around feasting on acorns on bad days and truffles on good days, and they absorb all that flavor. And they're tough. They're big, muscular animals, but when you brine them and braise them just right, it's spectacular, right? So cingale ragu is great. I like lepre, which is wild rabbit hare, HRA hare. Ribollita, the Tuscan bread soup is a favorite of mine. I adore that. Oh boy, frito misto from the coast. Of course, the pastas, the bucatinis, and all the different pastas that are indigenous to the region. I mean, that was too easy of a question. but to be honest, like, I mean, I just like cucina toscana. Like the food itself is great when I'm there, right? Because the same way I feel if I'm in Liguria, right? The regional cuisine of Italy, right? When you're eating it in that region, is the best thing you have. Everything comes from like where you're sitting, right? You can see probably where the fields, where the cows graze, and the hills where the olives were grown, and the wines were produced, and it's all right in front of you. And something about that vicinity, that closeness to it, just makes it so spectacular. I mean, they don't call it farm to table, in Italy. That's just called food.
Go ahead, Mary. You have some more questions.
Yeah. So you share details about your upcoming novel, but you literally just had a launch party for your other novel, Black Irish Blues. Can you tell us what Black Irish means and how you came up with the title?
Sure. Yes, that book just came out. I know it's a rarity that someone has two books coming out within a few months of each other. What happened was that I'd written Black Irish Blues, a year or so ago, and it was just slated for publication in December of 2020. Right? It was on the docket. When the lockdown came, I just had to write about Italy, so I wrote this new Italian book in this very short period of time, and it found itself a publication date very soon. Back to your question, Black Irish Blues is a noir. It's the sequel to Attleboro Blues. It's about this character named Caesar Styles. His family suffers from a Sicilian curse because they're the grandmother of their family, reportedly, this is all fiction, came to America not to immigrate and assimilate, she could kill a man. And that they believe, and their family, put a curse on their whole family here in America. And if you look at the things that happens to the family, they might be onto something. It's tough. This is noir, right? It's gritty. But Caesar is a poetic, interesting, soul who loves to cook. And at the end of Attleboro Blues, which takes place in Brooklyn, he decides that the way to end his family's curse is to go back to his hometown in northern New Jersey, the town where I grew up, just over George Washington Bridge, called Glen Rock, New Jersey, and buy the town's tavern and have a sense of normality. Right, the mother before she died said to him, the reason we're cursed is because we're always running away. We're always running away. Right, if you settle, right, make a life for yourself that our family came here to do, is what immigrants are supposed to do. Right, you'll undo the curse. So he tries. It doesn't work out that way because it's a noir, right? This is not a Hallmark story. It works out in some ways, but there's lots of things involved in it that are true to the genre of noir. And Black Irish Blues, that title comes from there's a type of person that we used to, when I was a kid living in this town, there was tons of Italians, there was tons of Irish, right? There was other families too, Caribbeans, Jewish folks, good old fashioned WASPs, right? But there was mostly Italians and Irish who all came over from northern Manhattan or the Bronx in the 70s. And there was a type of character called that people refer to as Black Irish. It's an Irishman who almost looks Italian. I mean, in some ways, their hair is dark, right? We think of Irish people as being fair-haired, fair-skinned, right? Blue eyes. There's a type of Irish person. I think it's from Galway or something. I'm not sure where they originate, but they have really dark black hair, right? And blue eyes. They're striking looking. Paul Ryan, the old congressman from Wisconsin, he was Black Irish, right? And there's the character that goes missing in the story is named Dinny Tuitt, right? And he's Black Irish.
That's very cool.
Yeah, it's a really fun book. And I love this character, Caesar Styles. I'm gonna write another one of his stories as soon as I get done with what I'm working on now, where he goes down to New Orleans because I just want to be in New Orleans to do the research.
Do you have a favorite style of writing? Seems to change up a little bit with some of your novels.
Yeah, I mean, I do lots of nonfiction, right? New York Times, Cucina Italiana, a bunch of Rachel Ray's magazines. I write for Brooklyn Magazine. I love short form journalism, especially when I get to tell people stories. I love, that I write lots of essays, personal essays, about, when my mother passed away, and my father was heartbroken. They were so in love, and he sort of rebounded, by riding a motorcycle again and playing music again. And I wrote that story for AARP magazine. Oh, Parade. I'm sorry, for Parade. So I love those personal anecdote stories that have heart to them. They're also short, so I can do them, relatively quickly. And then, of course, fiction. So I'm a journalist and a fiction writer. And I like both genres equally because they tap different requirements of my imagination and of my skill set. And they sort of keep me on my feet. The articles keep coming out, so that I'm seeing my byline all the time. And I need to see my name in print. I got a massive ego. So I get to say, hey, I get to share the story, etc. I got a story coming out in the Times tomorrow, I believe. Right. And I just love, that consistent publishing, but then the novels are what I think I am. By trade, I'm a novelist. I have a master's degree, a master of fine arts and creative writing from the New School here in Greenwich Village. And, that's sort of I can't say it's my bread and butter, but it's my bread and butter.
So to talk more about your food articles, you're a frequent contributor to New York Times and a whole bunch of other periodicals. Talk about your food writing and what you feel like when you're writing it.
What I've discovered is that, I'm able to write a lot about food for magazines without having to go out and do a bunch of research. Right? There's other articles that you can pitch and get, and land, right, that require a lot of research. And the food stuff I can write without having to do a ton of legwork. So I've been gravitating a lot towards that. A, because we were in a lockdown where I couldn't go necessarily go out in the streets and find a story. But B, because I just find it so satisfying. I knew there was lots of food people out there. There's food enthusiasts, all over the world. But one of the things that's been a pleasant discovery during this lockdown, right, amongst the drudgery, is how many food lovers I've been able to meet. The people that I've found online. I wouldn't be here right now if I was introduced to Mary, right? It's and that our connection was through food, right? This network of people who are really into food, and my writing about that is what's introduced me to them, right? And so it's like, like the character of Caesar Styles in the blues novels, right? He cooks to communicate with people, right? I write about food to communicate with people, right? I'm writing about things that that I think they care about, just like I care about them. And then when we connect, hey, what the stuff? I mean, I wouldn't be a writer if I didn't want to have relationships with people, right, and communicate. I mean, I could keep all the stuff in my drawer if I wanted to, right, and let no one see it, right? But it wouldn't get me out of bed in the morning, right? I sit myself in that chair every day, and it's tough work. I mean, it's not always fun, but I do it because I need to communicate. Right? I need to touch people and be part of our universal experience.
So tell us about, you mentioned talking about food and chefs. Tell us about your launch party that's coming up and who your special guest is going to be, who's going to cook for you.
I think book release events are kind of boring. I mean, I've been to a zillion of them. I've had a few of my own at some pretty prestigious bookstores, right? And it's so hard to get people to come out to a book reading too, right? Like, oh, come to this bookstore, sit quietly in your chair, right? There'll be like a bottle of wine and a bucket of ice and some crackers and cheese or something, right? And then you read and everyone claps, right? And it's like, oh, I mean, I'm a party guy. I like to party. Right? I love being around people, right? So all of my books, with the exception of a couple, I've launched with parties, right? I rent venues, in Brooklyn mostly, where there are music venues typically, right? And I have bands play, and I have food served, etc. And I have hundreds of people come because I want to make it into a party. I think the biggest one I had, pre-shutdown was at a venue in Brooklyn called Littlefield, where the soul singer is a buddy of mine from Brooklyn. Her name is Betty Smith. Her and her whole band played, so she's like a huge star. I mean, and I had her and her band come play. I read for a little while. They played, and it was just crazy. There was 200 people there. Can't do that now, right? I was like praying in myself, like, please, by the time Cucina Romana comes out, let this lockdown be over, right? Not only because I wanted the lockdown to be over, because I wanted to have a party, right? I was saying, I'll have the first party. Once the lockdown's over, it'll be huge. Everybody will come. Didn't work out that way. And I had a party for Black Irish Blues. Betty and her guitarist came over and played in my house, right? And then I read and I made fried lamb chops, which was great. And then this one for Cucina Romana, I'm having Rocco Di Spirito come over, right? The chef and cookbook author, national figure. He's an icon. He's a friend of mine. Right? If you look at my Pinterest page, there's more pictures of Rocco Di Spirito than anybody else. Looks like we're like family. And he's going to come cook. So I'm going to have it here in this loft down in Columbia Waterfront District in Brooklyn. I'm going to read from Cucina Romana. It's going to be on the 13th of March, a Saturday night, right? So no one's got anywhere to go on Saturday nights these days, I imagine. I'll probably sit right where I'm sitting right now. I'll read some passages from the book, not too many. I know it's boring listening to somebody read to you, right? And then Rocco's going to demonstrate some dishes from the book. I haven't picked out what they're going to be yet. But I'm thinking I got to go beefsteak of Fiorentina and then something, maybe a traditional Roman pasta. And he's going to cook. And then I'm going to pop a bottle of Barolo I have from 1967 that's been sitting in my shelf. And then we're going to turn the cameras on.
Cool.
You guys are coming, right?
Yeah.
It'll be on Facebook Live and Instagram Live. And my
Okay.
accounts are all Andrew Cotto. You can find me easily. That's my first last name as one word.
Cool. Mary, anything else?
I was just going to say, what's next? So you've got this big release, you've got all these novels. I mean, what's next?
I'm going to take a break, I think. I'm actually hoping to finish another novel before summer. Before my goal is for June 1st. I was working the project I was working on when the lockdown came, and I pivoted towards Cucina Romana for the solace it provided me. Was a memoir about a friend of mine named Mike, who passed away. He's my oldest, dearest, bestest friend. We were baptized together, and he died of leukemia 8 years ago. And, it was just a really powerful experience for me because I didn't realize that losing a friend could be so jarring. Right? I kept thinking, his wife and his children and his siblings, they have a right to be, racked by grief. And I was as well. It took me a long time to figure that out. And when I figured it out, it was really a testimony to the power of friendship. You know, like we spent so much time together growing up. It's like we merged. It was like our DNA began to mingle. And his loss was really devastating to me. And the memoir was just too painful for me to write. I just couldn't, you know, sit there and talk about me and him. So I found a way to fictionalize it. And surprise, food's a big part of it, right? The book's called Pasta Mike, right? And that's the nickname that the character's grandma had for Mike when he was a kid. She's called Pasta Mike, came over, you know, and it's about friendship. And I moved some things around to make the narrative less intimate to me. But it's really a story about two friends and one of them passing and the impact it had on him. It's pretty heavy duty, I gotta admit. I mean, it's a happy ending. You know, it's gonna have like that, that sort of is a wonderful life type ending, to it. So I always end with happiness. I don't go dark. I love happy endings and stories. You know, I want people to be uplifted on that last page and want to start back on page one. And that's what we're going to do here. So that's my next project. Then when I finish that, I'm going to go do a sequel to the Blues series set in New Orleans, as I mentioned before, so I can go down there and research and eat and write a really cool bayou story. And then I'm going to do the last installment in the Cucina series. I'm going to take our characters to the Amalfi Coast, where there'll be the third installment. There might be a trip out to Venice too within that one. But I like threes in series. I think it's beyond three. It gets to be a little bit redundant, right? So I'm going to do 3 of each of the Blues, and then the Cucina series, and then I don't know. Mary, I have no idea for that. I'm going to lay down for a very long time in a corner somewhere.
Well, that sounds amazing. Thank you for joining us tonight.
Yeah, thanks for joining us. And Justin, why don't you tell our audience how to join Sons and Daughters of Italy in America, please?
Well, first I want to say the Amalfi Coast sounds like a nice place for a little research and development trip. When the lockdown is over.
All I got to do.
Well, Andrew, can you tell us where and how we can get your books?
Sure. I mean, the books are available, everywhere books are sold, I guess. Of course, Amazon, Barnes and Noble are the most common places people buy books. But if you want to support your local bookstore, you can absolutely go to them and have them order it. I mean, the chance of my books being on the shelves and there's such limited shelf space and so many books is probably, small. Though I've seen it, but you can have them order it. It's in the system. So just, call them and have them deliver it. If you want autographed copies from me, you can write to me through my website, andrewcotto.com. I'll be happy to, get books from the publisher and sign them and inscribe them personally if you'd like and ship them out to you. And I've done plenty of that in the past, which people tend to like signed copies. And we don't have, readings anymore in public, so it's hard to get a signed copy. And I guess that's it.
Perfect. All right, everybody, well, go get your copy of Andrew's books. And if you're interested in joining as a member of the Order of Sons and Daughters of Italy, you can go to osia.org, click on the member tag and find your nearest local lodge or join as an at-large member online. You can follow us on our social media on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, LinkedIn, and Pinterest. And if you have any questions, write to us at nationaloffice@osia.org.
Well, thank you, Justin. And thank you, Andrew. Wonderful, wonderful interview. Lots of fun facts. And we wish you well with your book release party coming up. And it's been a pleasure having you as our guest. And thank you very much for appearing.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Mary. Thank you, Justin. I truly appreciate your time, and hello to your audience, and all good things to us going forward.